The wind cutting through the streets of Davos this morning isn't just cold, it is bitter. It carries the scent of something old and something dying. For 40 years, the elites gathered here in the Swiss Alps have told themselves the same comforting bedtime story. They told themselves that the world is flat, that commerce binds us, that the liberal order is inevitable and eternal. They were wrong. Yesterday, at 4 p.m. Central European Time, the illusion didn't just crack, it shattered. The news wires are calling it a diplomatic freeze, CNN is calling it a trade dispute, but you and I know better. We look at the map, we look at the pieces on the board. This isn't a dispute, this is the opening salvo of a war for the very geography of the future. The European Union has officially frozen the vote on the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. The deal that was supposed to save the Western economy is dead on the table. And the reason? It isn't tariffs, it isn't subsidies, it is a single massive island of ice and rock that sits at the top of the world. Greenland. The establishment in Brussels says the American president's offer to buy the territory is absurd. They call the threats to Denmark illegal. They're using words like international law and sovereignty. But the disruptor in the White House isn't listening to their vocabulary. He isn't playing by the rules of the 20th century. He's playing for the strategic choke points of the 21st. If you think this is about ego, if you think this is about a real estate deal gone wrong, you are missing the single most terrifying shift in modern history. The freeze in Brussels is not a pause, it is the sound of the Atlantic Alliance snapping in half. Let's strip away the noise. Let's look at what is actually happening in the war room. Picture the scene. On one side, you have the European Union, a complex, slow-moving machine built on consensus. It values process, it values stability. It believes that if you sign a paper, the world changes. Brussels is the ultimate symbol of the establishment, a fortress of bureaucracy that believes it can regulate reality into submission. On the other side, you have the disruptor. The American administration is no longer acting like an ally, it is acting like an empire in expansion mode. The president's arrival in Davos wasn't a diplomatic visit, it was a raid. The message delivered to the European leaders was simple, brutal, and calculated. The message was, give us the Arctic or we burn the trade deal. The mainstream media is laughing at the idea. They're mocking the concept of buying a country. They're treating it like a reality TV stunt. This is their fatal error. They are laughing while the ground beneath their feet is being sold. Why Greenland? Why now? Why is the United States willing to torch a trillion-dollar trade relationship with its oldest allies over a frozen wasteland? Because the map has changed. The Arctic is no longer just ice, it is the Mediterranean of the future. As the ice melts, the shipping lanes opening in the north are the most valuable transit routes on the planet. Who controls Greenland controls the gate between the Atlantic and the Arctic. Who controls Greenland sits on top of the largest untapped deposits of rare earth minerals in the hemisphere. The disruptor knows this. He looks at the supply chains dominated by the East. He looks at the dependency on foreign batteries, foreign chips, foreign guidance systems, and he sees the solution buried under the ice of Greenland. He doesn't see a Danish protectorate. He sees an American fortress. The establishment in Europe sees this as theft. They see it as a violation of the sovereign rights of Denmark in the European sphere. And they're right. In the old world, the rules of rules, it is theft. But in the new world, the world of survival, it is strategy. The European Union's decision to freeze the trade deal is their only card. It's a desperate attempt to leverage the American economy against the American president. They're betting that the American stock market will panic. They're betting that the corporate donors will scream. They're betting that the disruptor will blink. But look at the statement from the White House this morning. Look at the footage coming out of the pre-Davos meetings. Does the president look like a man who is blinking? He said, "There is no going back." Those 5 words should send a shiver down the spine of every bureaucrat in Brussels. There is no going back. This implies that the plan is already in motion. This implies that the trade deal was never the priority. The priority is total resource independence for the North American continent. If Europe refuses to sell, if Europe refuses to play ball, the United States is signaling that it is prepared to decouple, not just from China, but from the old world. Think about the sheer scale of this gamble. For 70 years, NATO was the bedrock of security. The US protected Europe, Europe provided the forward operating bases. It was a marriage of convenience and shared values. But what happens when the interests diverge? What happens when the United States decides that its future lies in the north, in the Arctic, and not in the defense of the German plains? The freezing of this trade deal is the first crack in the NATO shield. If the European Union retaliates with tariffs, which they are discussing right now behind closed doors in Strasbourg, the US will likely respond with maximum pressure. We're talking about tariffs on German cars, tariffs on French wine, tariffs on Italian luxury goods. But the economic pain is just the surface. The real threat is security. Rumors are already circulating that the lease on the Thule Air Base in Greenland is up for renegotiation. This is the most critical U.S. military asset in the Arctic. If Denmark tries to kick the Americans out, or if they try to use the base as leverage, the disruptor has made it clear. He won't leave. He will annex. Can you imagine the headline? U.S. troops securing a perimeter on European soil, not against an enemy, but against an ally? This is the narrative the establishment refuses to accept. They cannot process the idea of an aggressive America. They still think they can lecture Washington on shared values. But the lecture hall is empty. The Americans have left the building. They are out in the cold, surveying the ice, measuring the depth of the ports, calculating the tonnage of the rare earth mines. The European freeze is a defensive crouch. It is the move of a power that knows it is losing leverage. They are trying to hold on to the status quo with fingernails that are breaking. Meanwhile, the disruptor is playing four-dimensional chess. By freezing the deal, he has forced Europe to show its hand. He has forced them to publicly choose between their pride and their economy. If the trade deal stays frozen, Europe slides into recession. Their energy costs are already too high. Their demographics are collapsing. They needed this access to the American market. Without it, the European project begins to fray. And if they fold, if they come back to the table and whisper, "Okay, let's talk about Greenland," then the entire concept of national sovereignty in the West has changed forever. It means everything is for sale. It means the strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. The timeline is accelerating. The Davos meetings are set to begin in less than 12 hours. The private jets are landing. The motorcades are winding up the mountain passes. But the mood in the back of those limousines is not celebratory. It is funereal. The CEOs and prime ministers know that the script has been flipped. They prepared for a discussion on climate change targets and digital taxes. Instead, they are walking into a hostage negotiation. And the hostage is the alliance itself. The disruptor is expected to take the podium tomorrow. He will not apologize for the threats. He will not walk back the comments on Greenland. He will likely double down. He will paint a picture of a world on fire, a world where the United States is the only lifeboat, and he will tell them that the price of admission to that lifeboat is the Arctic. We are witnessing the end of the post-war era. We are witnessing the return of raw, naked conquest disguised as real estate development. The tragedy of the establishment is that they believe they have time. They believe they can form a committee, launch an inquiry, wait for the next election. They think this is a temporary aberration. But what if it isn't? What if the disruptor represents the new normal? What if the resource wars of the future require this kind of brutality? The frozen trade deal is the first domino. Watch the currency markets. Watch the troop movements in the North Atlantic. Watch the rhetoric coming out of Copenhagen. The Danish Prime Minister has said Greenland is not for sale, but in geopolitics, never is just a negotiating position. The pressure being applied to the European economy right now is immense. The U.S. Treasury has tools that can strangle the Eurozone banking system overnight. If the order comes down to weaponize the dollar against our own allies, the freeze in Brussels will turn into a meltdown. So, where does this leave us? Where does it leave you? It leaves us in a world where the map is being redrawn in real time. It leaves us watching a collision between an immovable force and an immovable object. The United States has decided that it must secure its northern flank at any cost. The European Union has decided it must defend its dignity at any cost. Something has to give. As the sun sets over the Alps tonight, the shadows are long, the silence is heavy, the trade deal is on ice, but the heat is rising. The disruptor has thrown the gauntlet on the table. The establishment is staring at it paralyzed. And somewhere in the dark waters of the North Atlantic, the icebreakers are moving, breaking the path, carving the future. This isn't just news. This is history, and it is happening right now. Don't look away.